Hi, it's Katrina. For 2,000 years, the final resting place of Cleopatra and Mark Antony has been history's most coveted mystery. But all of that is about to change. Archaeologists have just uncovered a new, massive clue, a sunken port and a mile-long tunnel that puts them right on the doorstep of the Queen's lost tomb at Taposiris Magna. New evidence could crack this case wide open, so let's check out the latest updates, and then we will dive into the hunt for other famous missing tombs, from Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan, to see what other long-lost treasures might be next.
Cleopatra's Sunken Gateway.
A submerged harbor, a secret tunnel, and a 2,000-year-old mystery that refuses to die.
Somewhere between history and legend lies Cleopatra VII, the last queen of ancient Egypt, immortalized as both brilliant ruler and seductive strategist. Her death, along with that of Mark Antony, marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the end of ancient Egypt, and the beginning of Roman Egypt.
But while her life has been endlessly dramatized, her tomb has never been found.
Now, nearly 2 millennia later, a team of archaeologists and underwater explorers led by the indomitable Dr. Kathleen Martinez may have uncovered the missing link in this ancient puzzle.
What did Dr. Martinez and company find? Just a sunken port near the temple of Taposiris Magna that could once have welcomed the Queen of the Nile herself to her final resting place.
And if that doesn't sound cinematic enough, you should see what Bob Ballard is doing. He is the legendary deep-sea explorer who found the Titanic, and now he's trying to find Cleopatra. Between Bob and Kathleen, we are closer than ever before to resurrecting a myth. The discovery of this sunken port was made off Egypt's Mediterranean coast, not far from the ruins of Taposiris Magna. While that sounds like some kind of magical curse, Taposiris Magna is in fact a temple complex once dedicated to Osiris, god of the dead and resurrection. Beneath layers of sand and salt water, Bob Ballard's dive team uncovered the polished stone floor of a previously unknown port. Think elegant limestone blocks, 20-foot-tall structures arranged in rows, smooth columns, and the skeletal remains of ancient storage jars and ship anchors. The port lies just off the mouth of a previously excavated 4,000-foot tunnel that links Taposiris Magna to the sea. It's a tunnel some archaeologists believe was designed precisely to allow a high-profile burial procession to enter discreetly from the coast.
What I'm saying is that if Cleopatra was transported by sea after her death, this likely would have been the landing point. Her body, ready to be embalmed and mummified, may have been sent by covert ship to this port, where it was unloaded and brought through the secret 4,000-foot tunnel to Taposiris Magna.
It's a pretty big breakthrough, but still lacking in definitive proof as to where the heck Cleopatra is right now. And trust me, nobody wants to find Cleopatra more than Dr. Kathleen Martinez, a woman who is no stranger to controversy. A Dominican lawyer turned archaeologist, she has spent nearly 20 years excavating Taposiris Magna based on one driving theory. Dr. Martinez firmly believes with all of her heart that Cleopatra and Mark Antony were not buried in Alexandria, as many scholars believe, but secretly interred in the Taposiris Magna temple, away from the prying eyes of the vengeful Romans.
Why? Because Alexandria had fallen. The city, once the intellectual jewel of the Mediterranean, was now a Roman outpost. Cleopatra may have chosen a sacred site associated with Osiris and Isis, whose myth mirrored her own tragic romance with Mark Antony, to ensure their eternal union together.
And of course, to keep the Romans away from her body. In Martinez's words, she had to choose a location where she could feel safe for her afterlife with Mark. Remember, guys, there was nothing more important to a royal Egyptian than getting the afterlife they believed they were entitled to. They saw it as their divine gift for being born royalty. Kathleen was actually the one who enlisted Bob Ballard's help. He's the man who not only found the wreck of the Titanic, but also the wreckage of the Bismarck and JFK's PT-109. Using sonar, 3D scans, and underwater imaging, Ballard's team mapped the port structure and surrounding landscape. These models offer a ghostly digital reconstruction of what the area might have looked like in 30 BC. What we're dealing with here was an active seafront bustling with sailors, priests, and enough activity to make a fishmonger faint. And perhaps on one fateful day, this bustling port hosted a funeral barge carrying the most powerful woman in the ancient world. Kathleen has suspected for decades that Taposiris Magna houses the hidden tomb. This newly uncovered sunken infrastructure is the circumstantial evidence she's been waiting for. This could be the physical means by which Cleopatra's body may have been transported to the temple in secret, buried out of Roman reach, and shielded by divine symbolism.
Martinez has endured skepticism, storms, floods, earthquakes, and academic snobbery. She has been put down, called a fraud, and ridiculed for her seemingly hopeless search. But the sunken port, revealed now 2 millennia after Cleopatra's death, has rekindled the hope that this enduring mystery might finally be solved. When Dr. Martinez is looking down into the sarcophagus of Cleopatra at the mummified queen, who will be laughing then?
The grave that doesn't want to be found.
Science has satellites, radar, and AI, but the spirit of Mongolia has silence, and so far, silence is winning.
When Genghis Khan died in 1227, the earth lost a conqueror, Mongolia gained a legend, and history inherited one hell of a ghost story. His empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. His name still stirs equal parts awe and dread. But as for where his bones lie, not even his enemies had a clue. And that was exactly the point.
Genghis Khan made sure he would never be found, not in death, and not even 800 years after his death.
Because 8 centuries later, we still don't know where the founder of the largest contiguous empire in history is buried. And now, a new generation of scientists armed with drones, satellites, radar, and digital magic is facing off against ancient Mongolian tradition, law, and cosmic levels of secrecy.
It's a high-tech standoff with a 13th century phantom, and the phantom doesn't have a budget. Before diving into the Mongolian countryside and slamming our shovels down willy-nilly, how much do you truly know about the Khan of Khans? Did you know that before he was Genghis Khan, he was Temujin?
Born around 1160, Temujin came of age in a war-torn Mongolia splintered by feuding nomadic tribes. His father, Yesugei, was a minor warlord who had the misfortune of being successful. And in the ancient world, success often meant assassination. Someone poisoned Yesugei before Temujin was 10. And so poor little Temujin fled to the mountaintop sanctuary of Burkhan Khaldun, a holy peak in the Khenti Mountains. There, he reportedly dropped to his knees, prayed to the eternal blue sky god Tengri, and made a pact with destiny.
It was one of those weird times where falling on your knees and yelling at the sky actually worked. He returned and began building alliances faster than Attila could ride his horse across the steppes.
By 1206, Temujin was crowned Genghis Khan, a term which loosely translates as universal ruler in English, or as explorer Albert Lin put it, the king of everything. The newly crowned Khan then proceeded to unify Mongolia's warring tribes and launch an empire that swallowed most of Asia and caused panic in every city across medieval Europe. Seriously, how many European spearmen do you think lost their bowels when they saw the great horde barreling down at them? I would say at least half.
But through it all, Genghis Khan never forgot the mountains.
He died in 1227 during a campaign against the Shishia Empire in northern China. The cause has never been confirmed. Some say he fell off his horse. Others claim he was shot with an arrow, assassinated, or taken down by the bubonic plague. There's even a rumor that he was castrated by a Shishia princess and died of blood loss.
I'm not sure which is the most terrible, but to be quite frank, I don't like the idea of any of them. Historical fan fiction aside, what matters is what came next. Utter silence.
His body was brought back to Mongolia and it disappeared. No tomb, no records, no relics. One story claims his funeral procession murdered every witness and then killed each other to make sure that no one who knew the location of the burial was left alive. Another rumor says a river was diverted to flood his grave, meaning it might currently be so deep that no one is ever going to find it.
Luckily, none of anything I just told you is based on a shred of evidence. That is straight from the mouth of Jack Weatherford, author of Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. After 800 years of rumor and speculation, the truth is that nobody knows the dang truth.
Now, you might be wondering what a proper Mongol burial looked like in the 13th century. I'm happy to add some fuel to your imagination. According to archaeologist Jan Beman, elite Mongols were often buried in wooden coffins, high on remote mountains with symbolic warrior gear like bows, quivers, and riding saddles stuffed into the ground with them. Unlike other people, say the Vikings or the Egyptians, ancient Mongolians did not see a need for gold or jewels in eternity. They were men of the land. For ancient Mongols, heaven was simply living on the land forever, under an endless blue sky, probably with horses. However, Weatherford doesn't think Genghis Khan would have been buried like other elite Mongols. He was a man's man, a working man's man, salt of the earth kind of guy. Weatherford thinks Genghis would have wanted to be buried simply and without extravagance. He may have been wrapped in hides and buried in the earth without so much as a coffin.
And if that's the case, then he's gone. His body was broken down by time and bacteria long ago. There is also the possibility that he wasn't buried at all.
Some ancient Mongols practiced sky burial rituals in which the dead were laid on mountaintops to be consumed by animals and their spirits returned to the heavens. Temujin's spiritual rebirth from outcast to warlord on the slopes of Burkhan Khaldun makes this more than just poetic. Some suspect the Khan wanted to return to the mountain he originally fled to after his father's death. If that's the case, there is no tomb, no body either, since it was probably picked apart by vultures 800 years ago. To be quite honest, there is a good chance that Genghis Khan has no tomb and therefore will never ever be found.
Kind of a bummer, right? So why don't we say, for the sake of hope, that Genghis Khan was buried? Where would it have happened?
Again, historians point to Burkhan Khaldun, the very mountain where he escaped death, found his calling, and became Khan. But there's a problem. The mountain is sacred, legally protected, and spiritually forbidden. Unless you are a state official or a shaman, you are not climbing that thing with a shovel.
That's not a joke. It's true. Mongolia does not want anyone digging around on Burkhan Khaldun. They do not want the Khan's grave to be disturbed. They don't even want it to be found.
So you have to ask yourself, do you respect the wishes of a culture who wants their founder to remain peacefully buried? Or do you let foreign archaeologists come in and dig up the corpse of that legendary founder?
Morally and ethically speaking, I think you know the right answer, but good luck getting archaeologists to stop trying to be modern-day tomb raiders.
In 2008, researcher Albert Lin launched the Valley of the Khans project with backing from the National Geographic Society. Instead of pickaxes and trench lines, which would land Albert in a Mongolian jail, he used satellites, drones, ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, electromagnetic induction, and something even more radical called crowdsourcing. Thousands of volunteers scanned ultra-high-res satellite images, pixel by pixel, flagging anomalies that could be man-made structures. Albert didn't need to break ground for his study. He just needed volunteers and a bunch of technology. And they found something. Artifacts dating to just after Khan's death were identified on the mountain. Researchers found roof tiles, horse teeth, charred wood, and near the summit, a massive ceremonial shrine. Look, any kind of permanent architecture on a mountaintop in a nomadic culture is suspicious. The ancient Mongolians didn't really build much. Before Genghis Khan, they were primarily nomadic and lived in yurts.
Could this have been Genghis Khan's burial place? Could the shrine mark the hidden entrance of his tomb? Maybe, but we'll probably never know. Albert didn't dig because he couldn't. Because in Mongolia, Genghis Khan isn't just history, he is heritage. They say 0.5% of the global male population is related to Genghis Khan. Now imagine what that number is in Mongolia. These people have the Khan flowing through their veins. Of course they are still protecting his tomb.
Alexander the Great's lost tomb. After 2,300 years, it turns out the world's most famous missing remains might be hiding in plain sight, beneath a monastery, behind a legend, and inside a fractured alabaster box. I'm talking about Alexander the Great. Alexander was a world conqueror, a god king, a cultural fusionist, a wine enthusiast, and a posthumous master of hide and seek. His empire stretched from Macedonia to the Indus Valley. His ambitions redrew maps and rewrote political systems, and when he died in Babylon in 323 BC, at the age of only 32, he left behind one colossal mystery. Where did they bury him? Now, after millennia of speculation, conflicting eyewitness accounts, body snatching, and a trail that somehow includes a Coptic monk and a collapsed rib cage, Egyptologist Christian de Varteven thinks he's cracked the code, or at least cracked open the sarcophagus lid to take a peek at the truth. De Varteven's breakthrough begins in ancient Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander himself. The city of his namesake was where his body was famously displayed in a golden sarcophagus for centuries after his death. Unlike Genghis Khan, whose tomb vanished immediately, Alexander's was a hot ticket for a long time. It was like the Mona Lisa. People came from all around the world to gawk at Alexander's body in Alexandria, up until it disappeared. According to de Varteven's research, the tomb was first located near the Mosque of Nabi Daniel, though of course the mosque didn't exist at the time. This was almost 1,000 years before Islam. Before it was a mosque, it was a site of spiritual and urban significance. It was an important enough area that Alexander could have been buried there with honors. But as the city of Alexandria evolved, the Greek rulers of Egypt, known as the Ptolemies, wanted their founding hero closer to the political heart of the city. So the tomb was allegedly relocated from the sacred site to a new burial mound along a grand avenue just shy of a mile away, closer to the heart of the city. It was like if they'd buried Queen Elizabeth in the middle of Piccadilly Circus instead of the royal crypt. The issue with this moving of the body is that after a while, people started to forget who Alexander was. I know that seems ridiculous today, but don't forget that even the Italians forgot what the Colosseum was for, and their ancestors built the thing. Alexander's corpse was one of the most famous in the world. Augustus himself supposedly visited it. Roman emperors went to see Alexander and ask him for advice on ruling the empire. But by late antiquity, the legend was rapidly fading. Somewhere before the fall of Rome, Alexander the Great faded into obscurity. The trail goes cold and doesn't get hot again until the 4th century AD, in a remote monastery in Egypt's eastern desert. Meet Saint Cisoes the Egyptian, a Coptic monk who lived in the 500s and was known for his long silences. Oh yeah, and he accidentally found Alexander's remains. Around 356 AD, Cisoes supposedly encountered Alexander's body already in skeletal disrepair. The exact details are blurry and vague at best, but supposedly he found the conqueror's body wasting away in the desert of all places. According to de Varteven's analysis of ancient Greek and Coptic texts, the body of Alexander the Great may have ended up at the monastery of St. Anthony, which was commissioned in 361, just 5 years after Cisoes found Alexander's body. So what exactly happened? How did Alexander go from being the most famous cold body in the world to being a discarded pile of bones in a desert monastery? You can blame Christianity. By the 4th century, Christianity had taken over Egypt. Pagan monuments were falling out of favor more rapidly than Beanie Babies in the 2000s. Alexander's remains, once centerpieces of imperial power, were suddenly liabilities, reminders of the days of heathen gods. So someone, possibly monks or sympathetic Roman officials, transferred the bones to the eastern desert for safekeeping. Then Cisoes found them, and then they ended up in the monastery of St. Anthony. But where are they today? Right where the monks left them. De Varteven thinks that beneath or near St. Anthony's monastery, which happens to be the oldest still inhabited Christian monastery on Earth, is Alexander's body. Well, his bones. And if scientists can find his bones, they can match known injuries of Alexander the Great to any injuries found on the skeleton. This should provide a surefire match without needing DNA analysis. But finding these bones is still a problem. No one knows where they are, and you can't just dismantle one of the most important Christian sites on the planet, which means even if Alexander is there, he's going to be keeping his secrets to himself for a while. Alexander the Great told everyone where he wanted to go after death. He wanted to be buried in Siwa, at the Oracle of Amon's temple, where he was informed that yes, he was indeed the son of Zeus. But he never got there. Alexander became a novelty for Roman emperors to gawk at. Then he disappeared, was rediscovered as a skeleton in a desert, and is now probably below an ancient church. It's a strange, poetic ending for a man who wanted the world and almost got it. King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. In the year 1191, the monks of Glastonbury Abbey dug into the earth and pulled out a national myth, or so they claimed. If you go to this place today, you can see the graves of King Arthur and his wife, Queen Guinevere. But is it really them who's down there? By the late 12th century, King Arthur had surpassed normal hero status. He was the most important figure in Britain, real or not. King Arthur was said to be the king who unified Britain in the Dark Ages, after the Romans botched the whole island. And although he was long dead, people believed King Arthur would return when Britain found itself in trouble to save the realm again. Some thought King Arthur would show up during World War II to save England from the Nazis. He didn't, but maybe he was waiting until the last minute. Given his importance, and remembering how gullible humans were in the Middle Ages, what do you think their reaction was in 1191? When a bunch of monks at Glastonbury Abbey claimed they found his remains 16 feet deep between two stone pyramids, the whole country flipped out. To make matters even juicier, the monks said that King Arthur shared his tomb with his beloved Queen Guinevere, and in case there were any doubts, a lead cross within the tomb read, "Here lies buried the glorious King Arthur and Guinevere, his second wife, in the Isle of Avalon." It was either the greatest archaeological discovery of the medieval period or the world's most successful fundraising campaign, because what happened next is a little suspect. The primary source for the tale I told you is Gerald of Wales, aka Geraldus Cambrensis. He was the royal clerk to King Henry II and a man known for combining sharp observation with frequent reality detours. In other words, he made stuff up. Gerald claimed he saw the remains of the king and queen himself. He recounted in breathless detail how monks at Glastonbury found the coffins beneath a pair of ancient pyramids on Abbey grounds. Inside were two skeletons, one male, one female. The female wore a blonde braid of hair that disintegrated when touched. And the king's bones, what bones they were, Gerald claimed them to be astonishingly large and full of battle wounds. He wrote, "When his shin bone was placed beside the shin of the tallest man of the locality, it came 3 fingers above the knee. He was essentially painting Arthur as a giant, towering, battle-hardened war machine and England's greatest protector." But was Gerald speaking the truth? Or was he, as he was known to do, making up stories? The great thing about being a habitual liar in the Middle Ages was that no one could check your facts. Not on Google and not in an encyclopedia. There was just no way to tell if Gerald was lying. And when you learn about the financial troubles of the monks, things get even more suspicious. In 1184, just a few years before the discovery, Glastonbury Abbey burned to the ground. The monks needed money to rebuild, and nothing brought in pilgrims and gold quite like a national savior buried on site. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's medieval PR 101. You need money for your abbey? Bring in the bones of someone famous. Or, if someone famous isn't available, any old bones will do. So did the monks fake Arthur's bones just to make a bit of cash? Or was this a really fortunate coincidence right after their home burned down? I give to you Ralph of Coggeshall's first-hand testimony. He was another medieval author who also claimed to see King Arthur's corpse. He was on the scene about 30 years after Gerald had already written the story of Arthur and the monks. He and Ralph had seemingly no connection at all. Nonetheless, Ralph confirmed Gerald's story. The burials, the pyramids, he confirmed it all. And Ralph didn't have any real benefit to lying. He came around 3 decades after the church needed money, so why would Ralph keep up the lie after so much time? In any case, the next 350 years saw pilgrims traveling to Glastonbury by the wagon load to see King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. Whether the bones truly belonged to them, it didn't really matter. The presence of the skeletons boosted King Arthur's reputation, put coins in the coffers of the monks, and made the pilgrims feel like they'd been in the presence of greatness. No one was being hurt, and it was profitable and good for everyone. Up until Henry VIII showed up with a sledgehammer and a divorce. When the dissolution of the monasteries came in 1539, thanks to the whole King Henry abandoning the Roman Church ordeal, Glastonbury was ransacked. The bones of Arthur and Guinevere, whether sacred or staged, vanished in the chaos. What remained was a stone marker, a centuries-old claim, and a legend too big to be buried.
The bones have never been seen again. And while modern historians remain mostly unconvinced that Arthur was ever real, never mind buried at Glastonbury, there is still hope. To the faithful, Glastonbury was the mythical Avalon, misty hills, sacred wells, hidden truths. For pilgrims, Glastonbury was proof that the king who was supposed to return had, in some small way, already come back. Not with a sword, but with bones in a coffin and a name on a cross. The missing mummy of Atahualpa. He offered those who would kill him a room of gold and was repaid with a garrote, which for the uninitiated is the famous strangling weapon of assassins since the dawn of hitmen. Now, the strangled emperor may lie somewhere in the Ecuadorian highlands, mummified, hidden, and waiting to rewrite history. In 1532, the Inca Empire was the largest and most complex civilization in pre-Columbian South America. That year, the empire crowned its newest, slightly blood-soaked sovereign. His name was Atahualpa, son of Huayna Capac, victor of a fratricidal civil war against his half-brother, Huascar. Atahualpa defeated his brother and seized control of an empire still reeling from plague, infighting, and the ripple effects of a succession crisis. He had a massive undertaking ahead of him if he wanted to fix the empire. What he didn't know was that the Spaniards had arrived with steel, guns, smallpox, and an alarming sense of entitlement. Atahualpa barely had time to claim the throne before he was ambushed in Cajamarca by a detachment of fewer than 200 conquistadors under the leadership of Francisco Pizarro. 200 Spanish guys on the other side of the world from their home with no backup took down an empire. But it wasn't exactly the most courageous of killings. It was a textbook trap, a cowardly move, some might say. Atahualpa, unarmed and surrounded by his nobles, was lured into a meeting with promises of peace. The Inca were ready to sit down and negotiate with the mysterious Spanish. Instead, he was captured in the ensuing massacre. Thousands of his men were killed in minutes. They had never encountered this level of treachery before, and they hadn't encountered gunpowder either. 200 Spanish utterly destroyed the emperor's forces. It was like 200 Navy SEALs versus 2,000 naked villagers woken in the middle of the night with nothing to defend themselves but sharp sticks. Before they offed the emperor, they demanded a ransom for his safe return. Atahualpa promised to fill a room with gold and twice over with silver in exchange for his release. The treasure poured in from across the Andes, a staggering display of imperial wealth. The Spanish could not believe the Inca were handing over so much loot. Pizarro took the gold, and then he took Atahualpa's life. There was no exchange at all. This was a robbery. In 1533, the Spaniards executed him by garrote. What they did with his body is a mystery. 500 years later, and we are still trying to find Atahualpa's tomb, if he even has one. Knowing the Spanish, they probably threw him into a ditch or something. Official accounts say Atahualpa received a Christian burial in Cajamarca, as per Spanish custom for a baptized soul. By the way, they baptized him before murdering him to prevent him from receiving a traditional Inca burial. The Spanish betrayed him and then spit on his grave by purposely denying him his own funeral customs. There are rumors, however, that some of his people exhumed his body shortly after the Spanish buried him, determined to honor their emperor with proper Inca funerary rites. For Inca royalty, that meant mummification. Andean elite mummies were preserved, dressed, enthroned, and brought out for festivals and state rituals. Inca mummies were not like Egyptian mummies even a little bit, except for both being actual mummies. To the Inca, their mummies were living ancestors who had to get out for a walk sometimes. They were sacred embodiments of power and lineage, and were consulted for decades after their deaths as if they were oracles. People would feed them offerings where they hung out in special temples called marquis. If Atahualpa's body had been successfully recovered and mummified, it wouldn't have just been hidden, it would have also been enshrined. But where? Tamara Estupiñán, a historian at the French Institute of Andean Studies, has a theory. Tamara believes that one of Atahualpa's most loyal generals, Rumiñahui, smuggled the emperor's body north and interred it in the remote mountain site of Maiqui Machay. Rumiñahui, who led the resistance in the Quito region after Atahualpa's death,
was legendary for hiding both treasure and troops in the folds of the Andes. If anyone had the loyalty, resources, and ruthlessness to preserve the emperor's mummy and protect it from Spanish desecration, it was him. Tamara believes Maiki Machay in what is now central Ecuador may have served as the secret sanctuary. The problem is archaeological proof. The story is compelling, the documents are suggestive, but the ground is still silent. Where is the physical evidence? I hate to say it, but it might be gone. The preservation of organic material in the Andes can be astonishing. Dozens of Inca mummies have survived and been discovered as if they were abandoned yesterday. But after nearly 500 years, even a sacred mummy can vanish, whether from looting, rotting, or the sheer disintegration of time. Even if Atahualpa was given a secret burial, he might be long gone, shriveled up into dust. Or he might be preserved inside a tomb, one full of ritual deposits and royal DNA. If such a tomb is ever found, it would be one of the most dramatic rediscoveries in the history of Andean archaeology. The Spanish took Atahualpa's ransom and melted it into bars, but wealth is fleeting. The Inca may have taken their emperor and turned him into something far more enduring, a sacred bundle of bones and memory concealed among the clouds. Do you think we'll find this emperor? Thanks for watching! Out of all the lost tombs waiting to be discovered, which do you hope is found first? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!